Even men at the top of their game find themselves wanting more from life. Whether it's more meaning, unshakable confidence, a bigger impact, more money, deeper love, a hotter sex life, or a powerful legacy. Find out how good your life can be on this episode of Man Alive. Also, as I've supported men in their love and work lives for 15 years now, many men ask for the right words to say to be more successful, attractive, and desirable. But I found it's not so simple as giving scripts or lines because every man is different. So giving words or scripts would be like giving a tall, thin man a shorter, wider man's pants, or vice versa. The words have to make sense for you and your personality, and there's so much happening beneath the surface that people are responding to. If you're interested in how to become a better lover and leader in your own unique way, go to shanajamescoaching.com/quiz, or you can text ALIVE to 44144. It only takes a couple minutes and you'll start to get an idea of how you can be both more respected and desired. After you fill it out, we can schedule a time to review your quiz and talk about your specific challenges and desires. So again, go to either shanajamescoaching.com/quiz or text ALIVE to 44144. That's ALIVE to 44144. Enjoy this episode of Man Alive. Hello and welcome to Man Alive. I'm your host, Shana James, and we're doing a special series for my book that's coming out called Honest Sex. And I'm very excited to have one of the experts I highlight and a dear friend in the book. Her name is Sarah Marshink. Welcome, Sarah.
Welcome. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Sarah is an incredible teacher and guide and mentor and a woman who I deeply trust. She has spent a decade in meditative states and experiences and continues to bring that into her life and experiences. And so there's a depth and a wisdom that I experience with you, Sarah, that informs honesty and that informs relationships, whether they're romantic or otherwise. And so part of what we want to talk about today is the idea of being honest about who we actually are. And there's a chapter in the book, we're not who we think we are, and neither are our partners. And so for some people, when they hear that, I think they're going to hear like, oh, okay, I have to be honest with who I am. That means I know what I like and I know what I don't like. And I say it, and I'm honest with myself and I'm honest with others. And what we really want to dive into today is more of an honesty about who we are as human beings. So our likes and our dislikes come from, certain parts, or Sarah has a framing called selfistry, right? Where we're making art with all of our different selves, or some other psychologists might call them parts or aspects. And so if we aren't aware that we have these different parts or different selves, and if we think, oh, I'm just one integrated Shana or Sarah, then relationships can get pretty muddy and challenging. So we want to dive into that today to give you a little more space to play with and understand yourself and partner or potential partner, if you're single, and really open up what love and relationship can be from a more mature, I was going to say more mature place, but I'm curious what you would call it, Sarah.
That's a good question. That's the phrase that you use in the book. And I do like that phrase because I do think it is expressive of what you're pointing towards. Let's see if another word pops as we dive in a little bit. What I would like to say about the way you're framing our conversation is how important it is to not think of this as a linear process, right? Yeah. So it's really super helpful to identify, one level of honesty or one experience of honesty, and without judging it as better or worse than a deeper honesty or a more expansive or more mature honesty. There are different kinds of honesty. And the first, one of the, again, see, I'm doing it too. I'm saying the first, but it's not necessarily the first. So like one aspect, maybe that's a better word of being honest, is what do I want? Which is a really hard question for a lot of people.
For a lot of people, for myself included.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Me too. Yeah. What do I want? What do I need? What do I like? And in the process of asking those very, basic questions in a way, or very personal,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
important, then comes the question, who is the self that is wanting those?
Exactly. That's what I was just going to say, right? That question. Okay, who is wanting that? Who within me? Or, and some people are like, wait, what? How could you even ask who within me or who is wanting that? Of course, it's just me. I want that.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Like, just me. And yet, how can me, if I'm one me, how can I want so many
So
different
many
things
different things and so many
at
contrasting
once?
things. Can you give a sense of self-history and what that is so people can have a sense of that framing that you use?
Yeah, I think we could start from right there, that in my journey that you mentioned, so spending all this concentrated time in retreat doing deep practice in meditation and a lot of study and a lot of contemplation, a lot of really simply just spending time with myself,
Yeah.
right? And asking the question, who am I? What do I want? After, my life kind of took me to a place where I was not really where I thought I wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to what we were just saying, asking the question, what do you want, is also the question, who are you? And
Yeah.
so or who am I, right? So from that inquiry and that steady inquiry, I was able to start to unpack and unravel that I guess there isn't one me here.
Mm.
There's a bunch of me's here.
Yeah.
And there's a me here that sees all those different me's or
Uh-huh.
can talk to them. And then all of a sudden, and that's the framework of self-history, or part of the framework, is what if each of your desires, so those of you who are listening, right? What if you took each of your desires and made them into a separate mini you, a
Mm-hmm.
mini self, and then you started to have a conversation with that one?
And would
You
you
know,
call the witness in this case?
So this is where it starts to get interesting. In self-history, one of the places we go to is this really objective self inside that we call awareness. But there's it's a gray area there for people. Like, it feels like a self also, and I don't even want to get too bent out of shape
Technical.
about,
Yeah.
yeah, like what we call it. But there is a self, there's something inside that is noticing everything else.
Right. And for many people, and my clients included, they've either like had glimpses of that but oftentimes have never even noticed that. Or like I remember one time years ago, decades ago, when I said to my mom, uh, the voices inside my head. And she looked at me, and my grandmother was schizophrenic. So she looked at me and she was just like, oh shit. Like, I was like, well, don't you hear voices inside your head? And she was like, no. But then a couple days later, she came back to me and said, oh, now I know what you're talking about. Right. These different aspects of myself, or, they're not, it wasn't a schizophrenic break. It was just, oh, we have different selves and different aspects kind of talking to each other internally.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important distinction, because the psychological experience, right, of schizophrenia
Yeah.
is very different than what we're talking about. And essentially because people on the outside see that a schizophrenic person, or somebody who's behaving in a schizophrenic manner or diagnosed with that disorder, they don't recognize that they are coming out as
Right.
multiple personalities. What we're talking about is having awareness of those different, and I don't call them personalities, I really call them selves.
Mm-hmm.
They have stories, they have background, they have a place where they live in our bodies, they have clothes that they wear, they have a whole narrative. I mean, it's super fun, actually, once you get in there. And then there's always this question, who is the one meeting all of these selves?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then we start to get into a different realm of honesty.
Yeah. Right. That's what I was going to say. Like it's so powerful in relationship when you can say to a partner, "Oh, I'm noticing there's a self or a part of me, that's feeling really upset with you right now." And then there's another one that's, compassionate and empathetic and can really kind of get where you're coming from. And so now they're both here and I'm not exactly sure what to do with them. but I'm bringing them both into this conversation, or I'm bringing them both into the room, right?
Yeah.
That's a really different conversation than someone who's kind of fused with and can't step back to objectively witness. I'm angry, or I'm upset, or I feel rejected, or any of those things.
Exactly. So here in what you're describing, if we use the word maturity, a less mature dynamic in a
Mhm.
relationship would be acting from those selves
Yeah.
without any self-reflection, which
Mhm.
often ends up, sometimes those selves are super clear, really loving, really compassionate, not a problem, but
Yeah.
often they're defensive or scared, or they're projecting, or so the first level of maturity is acting as those selves.
Yes.
Then the next or another level of
Right.
maturity
If
might
we're not trying to
be,
make it linear. Yeah.
we're trying not to make it linear or hierarchical or better than, just different. Though it's hard, right?
I
Language
know.
is hard. Okay. So here
Well,
we go. The next one is you and I are in a relationship and we love each other. We have trust. We recognize that we value this relationship. We're in it. So now something comes up between us, and we both, or one of us, has the presence to say, I'm noticing there's a self
mhm.
inside of me that wants to punch you in the nose right now, right? Or
Yes.
wants to run, or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Now
Whew.
that dynamic can be laborious, let's be honest. There's a lot
Yeah.
of processing, there's a lot of, investigating, there's a lot of, repair potential, and that can, it's intense, and it's, but what I would want to say to the listeners is it's worth it,
Yeah.
because at some point you get to the really mature relating, which is me taking responsibility for all those selves that are arising in me in any given moment, me sorting them out myself
Yeah.
instead of bringing them to you, and then me acting from a calm, present, integrated place.
Yeah. I mean, I love that, right? The learning to work with them on our own. And I've also had really beautiful experiences with a partner where we worked with them together, right? Where we were both able to witness and take responsibility and not blame or shame or attack the other. And it's been transformative and magical. And even, as I talk about in the book, like it brings spark and passion back, because instead of squashing those parts or hiding those parts, or, shoving our aliveness down into, uh, you know, fine, I'll just settle, or fine, I feel misunderstood, but I'll just, whatever, I'll just move on, right? Whether you do it with yourself and then bring it to your partner in a way where there's a request or an inspiration, or whether you do that together, yeah, it creates a different way of discovering each other and
Yeah.
actually continuing to grow and learn together, as opposed to a static relationship where it becomes kind of stagnant and, oh, I know you and you know me and nothing's going to change. And right, we can't expect anything from each other. And an old dog can't learn new tricks and all that stuff that I don't see as true.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's safe to say that it can bring that spark and
Mhm.
inspiration. It doesn't always.
Doesn't always. Yeah.
Sometimes it's intense, it's hard stuff, it's
Yeah.
selves come forward that are really scared or really traumatized or really
Yes.
just shy even,
Yeah.
and so there's a certain, but if there's a willingness to be in the exploration
Yes.
together, then it's it's always interesting, put it
It's
that way.
always interesting. I love that. And I think for people who haven't done a lot of this, it does take a third party, someone who has the experience, like a coach or a therapist or a mentor in the room, to help people not get stuck in those painful parts and the wounds and the traumas.
Yeah, let's face it, the world that we live in, we were never taught this kind of, number one, understanding of, the architecture of our selfhood. That's
Yeah.
number one. We have
Yeah.
no training in that. And then we have no skills training and how
Yeah.
to first of all, we're not even aware of it. Let's say we are somewhat aware of it, the skills necessary to communicate to
Mhm.
ourselves and to each other. So those two things are sorely lacking in
Yeah.
our world right now, to our great detriment.
Yeah.
um, And
which
so
I
people
think is why the divorce rate is
why there's people
astronomically
like
high.
you and me, yeah, doing this work on ourselves and with and for each other,
Yeah.
because it's the medicine that we need right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay. So I'm just thinking about we have these parts, right? We're talking about the younger parts or the less mature parts and how sometimes it can be fun, right? It can be fun to bring in the ones who are joyful and don't have that sense of responsibility, and there can be a play and a lightness. And then there can also be what I love to affectionately call a kind of shit show, right? If it's like the younger ones who are defensive and they want what they want. And, as I watch my kid grow up through these different stages, and there's a stubbornness and a righteousness and an I know everything and I remember that and you don't remember it right. And right, there's can be really messy.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, right, what do we want to bring to support people with that mess of the selves?
First of all, I think I would remove the word younger, right? I
Okay.
think that doesn't shine a nice light on our kids and grandkids and
Right.
or ourselves. It's a self, right? It's a self.
Okay.
And it's perfectly legitimate for it to be defensive, for it to be scared. Like there's a way in which I think the shit show is inevitable for all of us at some point. And the question is, can we get curious about the shit show?
Mm,
And can we, recognize when we're in it? Sometimes we don't recognize till afterwards, which is fine. We're all learning this. It's not like you're doing it wrong, because that's just another self that's wanting to get it right.
that's
There's,
interesting, right? The self that makes everything wrong and judges and
yeah.
analyzes. Yeah.
Oh, I have a few of those,
Oh,
definitely.
many, many. I have hundreds of them.
100, are you sure?
I don't know, maybe.
It's a lot. And they're so loud,
They're so loud.
It's so heartbreaking. So there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of internal noise to sort through. Let's make it clear that we're not pretending this is simple or easy.
Right.
So yeah, so there's going to be shit shows, and there's going to be moments for me. I don't know about you, but for me, the playful ones, they're the most shy. Like I have a good handle on the shit show ones, a pretty good handle, and I can hold them in check and communicate what I need to communicate. But my playful ones are so shy
Yeah.
and don't really come out easily. So I have to seek
Yeah.
opportunities, and relationships that will call them out.
Yes. I think that's something that a lot of people, I don't know if a lot of people, maybe many people I've talked to have been surprised by, is that the joyful ones and the playful ones, that they can be really shy too. It seems like it would just be natural to bring those parts out. But right, my family system wasn't always very joyful. So when I feel really joyful, I feel kind of embarrassed or shy, or like maybe this is silly or not even, that has no value.
Right. Grown-ups don't behave that way, right?
Right.
Like, whoa. And certainly our expression of joy might look different than a 4-year-old's, but the quality
Mm-hmm.
of that sensation, that bodily and emotional sensation, it's the same. It's
Yeah.
delight. It's
Yeah.
just delightful. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm thinking too that the more of ourselves that we get to know and the more of our partner selves we get to know, I don't know if this is true, but the thought that just came up is like, oh, it's like there's more touch points, there's more intimacy possible because, when we're hiding parts, one of the ways I see it is if I'm hiding parts of me, I don't usually get to feel loved for who I really am. And I often walk around thinking, well, if somebody saw this part, they wouldn't love me anymore, right? I'd be unlovable. And it creates this kind of tension, or I can't relax in certain ways because I'm trying to defend against being seen or those parts being seen. So, right, it seems like, okay, if I get to know my parts and I have more acceptance for my selves and parts, and then I start to have more acceptance for my partners or other people's parts and selves, there's that we're more able to be intimate and connected in deeper ways.
Yeah. Beautiful. And then just take that one order of magnitude farther out into the world and
Yeah.
imagine across political divides or religious belief systems, or any belief system is coming from a self, and more than likely that self has a counterpoint internally that is curious about the other side, if even maybe that's all, right? And so what if we were to open up this field, right? So it's opening up the field of our awareness of who we are. If we can extend that
Mm-hmm.
across the divides that we're experiencing globally right now, be super interesting what could arise. There's a generativity that can arise from that kind of curiosity
Yeah.
that block when we shut ourselves down.
Yeah.
So when we do the internal excavation and discovery,
Yeah.
then we're more likely to be able to do that with external selves that
Yeah.
show up as the other 600 and whatever billion people on the planet. So
Yeah.
it's interesting that way. For me, it's important because it's not just a solely personal, selfish act. It's
Yes.
one that is self-serving in order to serve the collective. And that
Yes.
feels
And I
really
love,
important.
yeah,
Yeah.
I love that you have your attention on that. I think sometimes I want to have more attention on that, and I don't always find I have the bandwidth, but that's one of the gifts I feel like you bring back to me, is to remember that, right, that we're not just doing this work just for us. It's not just a selfish thing to do, that the more aware we are, the more conscious we become, it does actually serve a bigger picture. It does serve the world. And right, it's like if we can't have peace with our own selves, or if we can't have peace within our own, certain family dynamics, how could we expect to have that in the world? Or I don't know what came first, the chicken or the egg, right? But there is something about uh acceptance or welcoming of these different selves and different parts in ourselves and others, it seems like.
Yeah. Yeah, and to really learn how to be with them,
Mm-hmm.
not just identify them, but how to be in, what Buddhism would call right relationship with them.
Mm.
And to realize that it's not, sometimes people think, well, if I get my shit together first, then I can. And as you're saying, chicken and egg wise, they really inform one another. So as I do the wisely selfish act of becoming more self-aware,
Mm-hmm.
it impacts the community around me and impacts, ideally, right, however many circles out, allows us to be more vulnerable, intimate, honest
Yeah.
with each other, right? Then that creates the conditions for me to be more authentically myself, which gives me the meaningful and fulfilling life that I was longing for when I started this self-development work, right?
Yes.
So they really do feed each other when they're done wisely and well.
Yeah. Yeah. That feels true.
Yeah.
Anything else on your mind or your heart, or anything else you want to say about being honest about who we are from this? I was going to say deeper place, but let's just say, like, from this different view.
Just a real a deep hope or wish or blessing that we all just accept where we're at, and really land where we're at and get curious right where we are, because it's likely that the kind of honesty that you and I are talking about is more readily accessible to more people than they realize.
Yeah.
you know
Yeah. For me, one of the doorways is vulnerability. And that's not easy, but it is, I think, more accessible than we realize, right? If I can even admit to myself, okay, I'm upset about this. What feels vulnerable about this for me, before I even go to admit it to someone else? Because that might be a step where I check in to see, does this person feel safe? Do I trust, her? How much do I trust this person? But I think if we start asking ourselves that question of, okay, why is this so vulnerable? Or why am I feeling so upset or hurt right now? I think that is a pathway to that deeper honesty.
Yeah. And like you said, to have somebody, a good guide or mentor or therapist that can help you do that,
Yeah.
so that you can navigate your own interior complexity in a way that, keeps you from being an asshole, keeps you from being afraid to be yourself, keeps you from being anxious and depressed, really liberates you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Somehow I just, when you said, keeps you from being an asshole, I just flashed to having an experience a couple years ago. I think it was hormonal, and working with an Ayurvedic practitioner, but where I was certain parts of my cycle where I was just feeling rage. And I've talked to other women who've gone through this too. And that was one of the times where I really got to practice, feeling like I was seeing red and I could just wanted, like you said, to punch people in the nose, and then just committing to, all right, I'm not going to say anything here. I'm just going to do my best to witness this. And, whether I needed to go exercise or punch pillows or do things on my own. But yeah, I think similar to what you said, I think we do have more capacity than we realize. I think you said we do have more access than we realize, but I think we also have more capacity. I think some people let themselves off the hook and just, allow themselves to be righteous. Like, this is my way and I just get to say it and it doesn't matter what impact it has. And so, right, also considering what impact do I want to have on
Yeah.
people, and especially my closest loved ones,
Yeah.
and how do I want to play this game? Do I want to be honest in a way that creates more closeness, or do I want to be honest, as I talk about in the book, the kind of like say it like it is, it doesn't really matter how it impacts people, but that doesn't create a foundation of trust and respect. And I think I was guilty of that in my marriage decades ago,
Yeah.
that I didn't have the maturity, is what I would call it, to stop myself and to be able to really consider,
Yeah.
okay, how is what I'm about to say going to impact the person in front of me?
Yeah. And it's really delicate because when you speak from that, what you're calling that immature place, let's say from the rage, that's honest. That's true. That
Yeah.
is your feeling. That's real. So we don't want to diminish that and say, oh, that's just your trauma.
Young self or trauma.
Just,
Right. Yeah.
yeah, just get over it. It's like, no, 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 no. Own it, claim it, name it, feel it, and do that from a place inside yourself before you go out and relate to the person, whether it's a beloved
Yeah.
or whether it's the cashier at the grocery store. And this is where that self-awareness piece comes in, and the distinction between, yeah, I'm aware that I'm rageful right now, I'm being honest, what the fuck is wrong with you? So there's that level of honesty, and
Yeah.
then there's the level of honesty. For me, it feels like, like the circle just gets bigger, and then my eyes are in the circumference of the circle, or some kind of awareness, and I can see that rageful self, and I
Mm-hmm.
can talk to them, and that's not the totality of who
Of
I
who I
am.
am.
I'm going to be really honest
Yeah.
now, right? And normally, or I shouldn't say normally, but historically, meditation practices have been the tools or the methods to cultivate this witness capacity. But
Yeah.
I'll tell you, Shana, more and more as I'm working with students and mentees, I'm realizing that, like what you just said, which is a lot of people just don't want to have that level of awareness. And
Mm.
yet, many of us, so they say, I don't need to meditate, I don't want to meditate, but I'm actually discovering that people do want it. And
Mm.
meditation isn't the only pathway
Pathway.
cultivating that. Sometimes it's enough just to listen to the conversation we're having right now. And the
Yeah.
next time something comes up, you just stop and wonder,
Yeah.
is this self? What do I want to do with this feeling right now? To
Yeah.
just pause.
Yeah. Yeah.
So hopefully that the listener will take that away at least. You don't have to become, some spiritual master, some, PhD in psychotherapy. Just slow down and get curious.
Yeah. I have the book in the quote in the book, the Viktor Frankl quote, about between stimulus and response, there is a space, right? And that is like, I think meditation has helped me cultivate that slowing down to be able to witness, oh, before this comes out of my mouth, I have a choice. I have a breath. And in that breath, I can either clamp, not let the disrespectful things come out of my mouth, or I can just let it rip. And really choosing that has been part of my path, choosing to say, okay, I'm going to pause and I'm not going to say anything until I have more trust in whatever part of myself is going to speak, until I choose the part of myself that's going to speak, rather than that part just ripping through me.
Without diminishing or exiling or judging that self.
Right. I don't have to make that self wrong. And I also don't have to give the keys to the bus to that part.
Exactly. And it takes practice, and it can be fun. Practice can be fun.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being one of my guides and mentors. Thank you for the wisdom you share in the book. And I'm grateful to know you.
It's been great. Thanks, sweetie.
I'm so glad you joined us for today's episode of Man Alive. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and it gave you something to consider and explore in your life. If you like what you heard, I'd be so grateful for you to subscribe and write a quick review that helps men like you find us. And again, head over to shanajamescoaching.com/quiz or text the word ALIVE, ALIVE, to 44144 to get a sense of how you can become a better lover and leader. You'll start to see how you can be both more respected and desired in your unique and genuine way. If you don't feel as confident or as excited about life or love as you'd like to be, this quiz is a really great starting point and will guide you toward a more passionate love life and a more inspiring and successful career. So again, text ALIVE, ALIVE, to 44144 or head over to shanajamescoaching.com/quiz. Join us each week for a new episode of Man Alive.